Hello everyone, welcome to CKA Lab 12. This is going to be a long lab, but it's a pretty important and in-depth lab. So let's take a look at our requirements, and at first it may not make sense all the way. So what maybe it's better to explain the diagram that makes more sense. So the requirement is we create an nginx pod, and you're already given the YAML files, no problem there. And you're also given an YAML file for the service, and they match up between the label on the pod and the selector on the service. So that's how the pod becomes part of the service, which is all great. In the service, we defined a couple of ports that points to the node port. So this, if you can imagine this node, just an example of one node, it will have multiple node with the exact same thing, right? It will have the same port proxied back to the port 80 on the nginx pod. So if you did all that, in theory, you should be able to hit this service because the node has a public IP, external IP available from anywhere. So you would hit the public IP on this port, and voila, you should get the nginx page, HTML page. But I spent a couple of hours troubleshooting this. It wasn't working. It wasn't working. So I decided to do this lab because I finally figured out what was wrong. And in doing so, it made a lot of sense. It's exactly how this flow works from end to end. You create a web service on your Kubernetes pod, and you put it behind the service. And then how do you actually get to it from outside? And from inside, it's pretty easy because nothing blocking it. So this is the whole diagram. Once you have it all working, you should be able to hit this IP on this port, either through curl or the browser. Now, but turns out when doing this in Google Cloud in GKE or part of GCP, there's a default firewall policy that blocks all traffic. So you can't get to it. You have to add a rule in the firewall for the VPC to allow this port and the other port to come through from outside. So that was the missing piece. Now in the CKA exam, they're not going to ask you to do in GCP stuff, but the point of this lab is to understand from end to end how your traffic from your client, from curl or browser, hits the pod and you get the page back, right? So let's now look at the requirement. And the first step is to create the pod using this this YAML code. So that's pretty easy. vip.yaml. Notice this pod has a label name nginx because this will be used in the service definition, and that's how this pod will map to the service. All right, so let's create that pod. K apply -f p.yaml, and we can see the pod. And if we show labels, you see the label is name equals nginx. Step number 2 is create the Nodeport service. Now, service can have many different kinds. In this case, we were choosing to use Nodeport because that way we can hit the public IP of the Nodeport. That's how you get to it. All right, so let's create that vis.yaml for S for service. Notice that it's a Nodeport type service. Notice that we're defining 2 ports, 80 and 443, that will map to these 2 ports on the node machine. And these ports have to be above 30,000. So I map 30,080 to 80 and 30,043 to 443. Actually, this should be 443. All right. And notice that selector is set to name equals nginx. That's how it'll grab the pod behind it. So that should do the trick. Okay, apply -f s.yaml. All right, so that's created. So I will see you in part 2 of this lab. This is lab 12 for KC exam part 1. And I will see you in part 2 because this lab is going to run for a while.